Tonight, I'm pleased to welcome our moderator for our third Ward Candidates Forum, Journal Editor Sarah Mackenzie. Sarah has served as editor of the journals in Minneapolis since 2006. She is also on the board of directors for the Minnesota Society of Professional Journalists, has a weekly news segment on Fox 9 at Mondays at 8:30, and serves as an adjunct professor at the University of Minnesota School of Journalism and Mass Communication. Sarah Mackenzie.
Well, thank you all so much. This is very exciting. I'm usually sitting and taking notes ferociously, covering these debates for the Journal. So it's very fun to be able to be up here and to ask questions. Being 4 weeks away from Election Day, I'm so excited. I'm sure all of you are too. It's been a very long campaign season. So we have the candidates for the Third Ward Forum tonight, Diane Hofstede, Jacob Fry, Michael Catch, and Christina Gronquist. First off, I'm going to just read the ground rules that the candidates agreed to before I get started, and then we will have a drawing to see who goes first. I have a number of questions that I want to get to, but there should also be time for audience members to submit questions that I will read to the candidates as well. Okay, so here are the rules. No campaign banners or signs or campaign paraphernalia is allowed inside. A designated place will be allowed outside for campaign literature. And like I said, the order of speaking will be determined by a drawing. Questions will be addressed and answered by all of the candidates. Time limits will be strictly enforced, and I'm going to be tough about that one for sure. And I will be responsible for enforcing those time limits. And I asked you, the audience, no cheering or jeering during the candidate responses to the questions. All right, so those are the ground rules. Yeah, and if you'd like to ask a question, Jerry's got some cards here, and we'll be collecting those. All right, so can we welcome the candidates now? The candidates would like to come to the table. You can sit whichever way you want. Is Diane here yet? So we're just waiting for her? Okay. Okay, Andrea, you are... That is the most important job, Andrea, so we will want you. Okay. So the drawing, Jacob, you are going to be the first person to answer my first question. So as soon as Diane gets here, we'll get started.
You should start.
Okay, so should we start with opening statements? Jacob Fry. Yes.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out. I think public discourse is essential to any campaign, to any election, so I really appreciate your attendance. My name is Jacob Fry, and I'm running for city council here because our city and our ward, it deserves to thrive. And through grassroots organization that includes everybody in the process, and I see a whole lot of familiar faces here, through innovative vision and through effective, responsive leadership, we can make sure it does just that. I, like so many of you, I fell in love with this city. I fell in love with the notion I could walk across the Mississippi River on my way to work. I fell in love with an activist, engaged population fully capable of enacting the change they envision. I fell in love with a city that in many respects, and through the right leadership, can become very much like a big old neighborhood. Like a big old neighborhood built on diversity, Diversity in terms of people. Our differences make us stronger. Diversity in terms of transportation options conducive to young and old alike. Diversity for employment, entertainment, even restaurant choice. Diversity in every sense of the word will make our ward and our city a stronger, better place to live. I envision a big old neighborhood that is a great option for families, and that means adequate green space. That means retaining Gold Medal Park. I envision a ward that is an attractive option for families, a great option for small and local businesses, and here's the thing that is most crucial. This next decade here is absolutely crucial, and we are at a crossroads. We need a city council member that is going to be effective, that is going to be responsive, that is going to be able to say to developers, you know what, if you're coming in, here are the 5 or 6 things that we need. We need a building that is environmentally sustainable, collects rainwater, uses solar, has a proper connection to the river, and fits with the overarching plan for the neighborhood. I am the one that can deliver that. We have built a phenomenal organization, a phenomenal campaign to substantially win the DFL endorsement. And
all right, Jacob, you're done.
November.
I'm going to talk. Okay. Let's just go down the line. Michael Catch, have you got 2 minutes for your opening statement?
Thank you. I don't know, guys. Have you ever heard so much BS in your life? I mean, well, look around this room. I mean, most of us are older or getting older, and every time we raise property taxes, well, our fixed incomes don't seem to match. And what we're really talking about here is fiscal mismanagement and malfeasance that has gone on at City Hall that I have worked for the last, 11 years to try to stand up to. I mean, Lisa will tell you how many times she's cut me off at city council meetings when I've spoken at the microphones. And it has been on behalf of the property owners and taxpayers of the city of Minneapolis. What it comes down to is we can't really afford a wow factor. Hell, we really can't afford a stadium. I testified at the state legislature 7 times on behalf of the Minneapolis Taxpayers League, because by the time we get around to actually bonding the stadium, 20 years from now when we finish paying off the bonds for the convention center, which by the way still need maintenance, but we're still going to have to pay for, that we're going to owe nearly $1 billion. Well, I just don't have that kind of money. I don't think anybody in this room has that kind of money. I don't want to see our neighbors challenged to the point where we lose our stability. We want to keep all our neighbors living here. We want to keep diversity of housing. We want to make sure that developers are responsible on probably of all the candidates, the developers' worst enemy. I'm going to make sure that they actually comply with what they say. Not like Little Lina did over with the Midtown Market, where they got $750,000 of city money to locate there and not keep any of the community benefits agreements. But somebody will actually stand up and say no.
Time's up. Thank you. 2 minutes. Correct. Yep, 2 minutes for opening and then for responses to the questions. All right, Councilmember Hosted, your opening statements.
Hi, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here this evening and to serve as a council member for the 3rd Ward in the city of Minneapolis the last 8 years. During those 8 years, we have accomplished a great deal. We balanced our budget, and most importantly, we've created a city that works. And it works because we've all worked together. We've worked together to increase our bikeways, our greenways, and we have increased the value of our city and made it stronger. I've been the council member that has not only demonstrated that I have the ability, but I have the record to deliver on promises that I have kept. Over the last 8 years, we have worked together to improve our city, and we have built over 2,200 units of sustainable housing. In addition to that, we've improved our bikeways and our pathways along the riverfront. The goals that we all share are increasing the number of schools that we have in this area. And my passion, my lifetime passion, our riverfront. By bringing our riverfront, the 3rd greatest riverfront in the world, as the primary economic focus of our city, we can continue to have our community grow. We can continue to walk through safe neighborhoods and to deliver prime public safety that I've delivered over the last 8 years. I've had some of the toughest areas of the city I've delivered. I have a record in which I want to continue. I ask for your support in the next 4 years as your council person for the 3rd Ward.
Okay, thank you. Christina Gronquist?
Good evening, everybody. I want to thank everybody for coming here tonight, and I want to thank the Journal for moderating and also for very fair and balanced coverage of this election. It's much appreciated. I'm running for City Council, endorsed by the Green Party, and I am, there's 3 overarching kind of themes of my campaign, and that is accountability, transparency, and empowerment. But what I'm going to do is tell you a little bit about me. I don't have any lawn signs. Some of you might not know who I am. Christina Gronquist. I'm a lifelong Minneapolis resident. I've lived in the 3rd Ward for over a decade. I'm Assistant General Manager of Eastside Food Co-op on 26th and Central. I have served on the St. Anthony West Neighborhood Organization for several years as treasurer. I'm a founding member of the Northeast Investment Co-op, and also been very active with Minneapolis Achieve, which is the nonprofit wing, so to speak, of the public schools. I'm a single mom. I'm a homeowner right now. I've been a landlord. I've been a renter, business owner, small business owner, large business owner. My daughter was raised in the Minneapolis public schools. I've been very distressed at the decisions, some of the decisions that have been made at the City Council over the last term or 2, and that's why I'm running, again, to bring accountability, transparency, and empowerment back to City Hall. Thank you so much for listening.
All right. All right, now we're going to get into my questions. And again, you have 2 minutes to respond, but we have lots of great questions from members of the audience too, so you do not have to use that entire 2 minutes, and we can cover more ground if you are concise. All right, and so Michael Catch, I'll have you address this question to you first, and then we'll just go down the line. So the first question, in your view, what are the most pressing issues facing the 3rd Ward?
Well, I think probably one of the biggest issues that we have is how do we manage to keep the 3rd Ward as pretty much it stands. We need to have, obviously, density and growth in the downtown area, especially around the new stadium that we're going to get, whether we like it or not. We want to keep single-family homes and single families, I mean families with children, in areas like St. Anthony West and Sheridan, Beltrami, and we want to keep some home ownership going on in Marcy Homes. We have to look at these small area plans that neighborhood associations draft, just like this neighborhood associations. The idea that the Minneapolis plan is a plan of small area plans, so that when we go to the planning commission, when we go to zoning, that we are working within the cooperation of each one of these neighborhoods, and not for the wants and needs of some individual developer. We have to make sure that the culture of our neighborhoods and what we love about Minneapolis remains, and that we don't change things to the point where we will look around and say, when did we become Manhattan? Who wanted to live in Manhattan? No, we live in Minneapolis. We live here because we love Minneapolis. My biggest problem is I care. I really wish I didn't care. A lot of my neighbors don't. If you look at our city election results, our neighbors don't care. I'd like to be one of them, but I just can't bring myself to not care, which is why I'm standing here today.
Okay, Councilmember Hofstad next. Do you need me to repeat the question, or?
I think I remember.
Okay.
Thank you. I think some of the biggest challenges that we have before us are related to public safety. Without public safety, we don't have economic development. One of the things that I've realized as we've created additional development within the city is that it puts demands on our public safety. And we have a very strong police chief, but that chief cannot do her job alone without our help. So public safety is our #1 challenge. Economic development, in order to keep the city growing, to keep our tax base growing, economic development is an important issue that we need to consider. The stadium, which was a development that I was an early supporter for, will bring us opportunities to fill in some of those vacant parking lots that have been in our neighborhood for over a decade, and to replace it with green space and bikeways and other kinds of transit options that are in the plan for the new stadium development. Along with that will of course come the opportunity for new jobs. One of the considerations that we are looking at the council is a new Wells Fargo project that would bring 5,000 additional jobs with training to the city of Minneapolis. Those are opportunities and challenges that we have that all of us need to work on. I think that my experience in working with public safety, the reducing crime rates which we have experienced over this last 8 years, brings me the experience that and can bring success to the challenges we have.
Okay, Christina Gronquist, next.
Well, as a Green Party candidate and a member of the Green Party, I think one of my top priorities would be looking at economic development with a green perspective. And our ward has incredible assets in terms of the river, the Mississippi River, and we have, now we have a new ward which is redistricted that encompasses the downtown area. That's very different. We need to look at development very carefully, and we need to look at finding creative solutions with scarce resources, which is something I can attest to doing. Working at Eastside Food Co-op, we had a real tough go of it our first 4 or 5 years. So that is important to me, looking at green development, careful planning. I would opposed the stadium decision. That should have been put to a referendum. I think having this stadium where it is it's a huge strategic error as a result of poor state and council leadership. Also, in terms of public safety, we have the lowest crime rate, I think, now almost in history in Ward 3, and I'm much more concerned right now about public safety when it comes to young men and how they're being treated by our police, and racial profiling, and police accountability and police misconduct is at the top of my campaign. Thank you.
Okay, Jacob Fry.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we are at a critical time period right now. We used to be a city of about 530,000. We're now a city of approximately 380,000. And there's no dispute that approximately 200,000 decline in population has contributed to economic decline. It's contributed to safety concerns because there are fewer eyes on the street. And it's kind of detracted from the overall vitality of what our city can be. So a big part is we do need to increase our residential population. Now in doing so, it's important to look at the demographics that we do have and we don't have. Right now, we've basically got two demographics, both of which value the city for many of the same reasons. One, we've got empty nesters who recognize the value of what a city can be, who have moved back to the city. Second, we have young professionals. Same thing. By and large, though, we're missing that 30-year gap in between, which is oftentimes comprised of families. I'm 32 years old. I cannot tell you how many of my friends have met somebody, had a kid becomes 3 years old, and they immediately jump ship and move to Edina or Minnetonka. That doesn't need to be the going rate. There is a lot of incentive to retain families. Families are about 2 times as likely to be in the top 20% of income earners, thus contributing more to the tax base and lowering property taxes for the rest of us. They're about 5 times as likely to be actively involved and engaged in the neighborhood association, which I would argue is always a good thing. So we need to find ways to retain families, and the ways that we do it are, 1, we need safe streets. 2, we need pedestrian-friendly areas. 3, we need adequate green space. And 4, and this may be the most important, we need a great and a viable option for a school. And I'm already working on all 4 of those, and especially the last one. We've been endorsed by Jenny Arneson of the school board. I've been working directly with her to ensure that there is a school in the next year and a half.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, for the next question, we'll start with Councilmember Hofstad, and then we'll go down the line again. So this question is, how would you work to ensure that your office maintains a high standard of constituent services if elected?
I think that's a good question. The goal of mine is always to maintain high level of constituent services. There's a variety of ways in which you do that. One of them is certainly by answering phones and emails. We receive within a year about 25,000 emails and 10,000 phone calls in our office. And so I have one other assistant and myself and a person who answers the main telephone. So the 3 of us are responsible for doing all of that in addition to the series of meetings. I've had over 1,000 community meetings within the city. So what I do in terms of constituent services, not only answering emails and answering phone calls, but also going out to almost all the neighborhood meetings on a regular basis. It's very routine for me to be at neighborhood meetings, not only within the neighborhood, but with outside, in order to listen and to respond to community members. I have a monthly care meeting, and tomorrow evening I'm doing our annual 3rd Ward Neighborhood Fest, an opportunity for us all to get together to talk about and learn more about the ward and each other. I'm very available. My phone numbers are published, and I answer emails. I think it's very, very important to deliver constituent service. But it isn't just constituent service in one way. It's a variety of ways in which you have to reach out to the community members on a regular basis.
Okay, thank you. Christina Gronquist? And if it saves time, if you guys just want to keep the microphone at the table too, whatever works.
So constituent service, very, very important. I tend to get caught up in the issues that I feel very passionate about, which have to do with civil rights and racial justice and environmental issues. But I do realize very much that the city council position is one of just hard work and addressing constituent service. I have a background in HR, and throughout my life and my various careers, I've been very much a customer service expert and also very much a process person. So I feel like I can offer excellent constituent service, and I think that there's ways to do outreach as well in terms of constituent service, which goes beyond answering phones and going to the sort of typical meetings. I think you have to stretch yourself further. I think we have a large amount of people in this ward and obviously in the city that have pretty much given up on the system, and they don't think City Hall works for them. They think City Hall is run by institutions like the Police Federation and other types of lobbyists and special interest groups. So my goal in constituent service would be to try to reach those constituents that are disaffected. Thank you.
Okay. Jacob?
I would argue about 50% of what a city council member should be doing is not very sexy. It's making sure that the streets get plowed, it's making sure that the trash gets picked up, that the potholes are filled. And in doing all of these things, what you need, one, is a council member that has an organization. One has an organization in their office, is able to retain staff, is able to hire staff, and we will be able to do that. But the second piece, and this is perhaps even more important, is having an organization at large. That is what we've got, and we have it in spades. We have so many talented individuals that are working right now in the community, not just on our campaign, but to benefit the city as a whole. And that is incredibly important. Second off, for those of you who are presently in Lisa Goodman's ward, and most of you are, whether or not you agree with Lisa Goodman, you know one thing. She's incredibly responsive, and she'll get back to you within 24 hours every single time. I am making the exact same pledge. Anytime you shoot me a call or an email, I will respond within 24 hours, and you do that with an organization.
Thank you. Michael Ketch?
Now, first I want to say that's not my experience with Lisa Goodman, and I've lived in Lisa Goodman's ward for, gosh, 7, 8 years. I mean, she doesn't return my calls. She crosses the street when she sees me coming. Really,
Lisa's here, you know.
She doesn't. But I don't honestly believe in the term constituent. See, here's the thing. Teddy Roosevelt said that if you're not involved in politics, you will give way to a tyranny. That's what I actually believe that our city government is. It's a tyranny. And for those of us who don't agree with what they do, I believe that all of you are the city council person. And as such, your job is to direct that office to do your will. It isn't any of us here. You're the organization. And it isn't for any of us to be making those decisions for you. This is not an nanny state. You are a responsible adult population. And therefore, I have worked with the Pirate Party, which is a big party in Germany, and they've got seats in the German parliament, and they have seats in the parliament in Iceland. And what they've created is something called liquid democracy, which is basically a computer software, it's a program. And what we want to do is put everybody online. Everybody who lives in the ward is going to have a unique username and ID. And you'll be able to go in, amend ordinances, strike down ordinance, have community conversations, because we can't just wait until the next meeting of the DMNA before we can come out and decide to make a change. We don't know what's going to be coming up on the agenda before City Council, before any of their meetings. Okay, as a council member, I need to educate you and inform you. I need to give you every detail what's going on. There has to be transparency in the council office. And then once I've done my job of informing you of everything that's going on, I have to listen to what you want. It's not what I want. It's not what Mr. Fryer wants, or Diane wants, or Christina wants. It's what you want. And this is the difference.
Time's up. Thank you. Someone's phone's ringing. Okay, next question, and Christina Gronquist, will start with you for this question. If elected, how would you advocate for better connections between downtown's core and downtown east?
Would you say the question again?
Sure. If elected, how would you advocate for better connections between downtown's core and downtown east?
Well, I think we're on the right path right now in a lot of our transportation options that we've been pursuing. And I believe that it has to do with bicycling that we're promoting, with pedestrian walkways. And we are, I think headed very much on the right path with the connectivity. So my campaign would enhance that, work to enhance that, and I think that, we've got a number of things going. We've got buses that we need to run a lot better, and we have cabs, we have a lot of ways to connect, but we also have a lot of barriers, and that can be ugly kind of lots, surface lots. It can be barriers in the sense of visual or aesthetic barriers that keep us apart, and I would promote a green perspective type of a flow to connect the areas. And really it's about people, and it's about connecting people. Thank you.
Thank you. Jacob?
Transportation is, of course, important for connectivity, but in this case, I think the most important part is the design and layout of our city. Now, we have a very large project that's going in downtown East in the very near future in the Viking Stadium. But I would argue that it's not the Viking Stadium that'll have the most dramatic impact on the city going forward in connectivity. It's actually the surrounding development. Now, there is a proposed development that's 2 towers, approximately 22 stories worth of commercial, 300 residential units, and about 42,000 square feet worth of retail. Now that's a great start. That's 2 square blocks. Now there are 3 additional blocks though. 2 of those blocks, there's plans for a park. Now 2 square blocks worth of a park is a very large area. This is great, but we need to make sure that there's an adequate number of eyes on that park. Without an adequate number of eyes, without a constant inflow and outflow from that park, it will become subject to crime. So I think it is incumbent, I think it is necessary, I think it is essential that we get probably more than 300 residential units surrounding that park, and I'm going to be able to go out and not just take what's given, but actually go out and affirmatively seek to make sure that this is a thriving community, a thriving neighborhood going forward, and it is well connected to the rest of downtown.
Thank you. Okay, Michael Catch.
Gosh, I'm glad I got this question. First off, it comes down to land use, as almost everybody said, but let's look at what downtown East should be connected to, rather than worrying about the urban core. It should be connected to Fairview University Hospital and its clinics. It should be connected to Abbott Northwestern Hospital and its excellent cardiac unit. Probably the best, maybe the best in the country. So what could draw people to actually want to live here? I think that we all know that we have a shortage of 55+ senior community housing. And I think we really need to stop thinking about commercial or regular residential and start thinking about what about those aging populations in Wayzata and Minnetonka, and maybe they might want to live in this area where they can get on a train or a short bus ride to get to a clinic. Yes, the downtown core is going to, unfortunately, according to meetings I've taken with the Rotary Club, going to shrink. Office space is not as demanded as it once was. People telecommute now. It's going to get worse. We're going to see less office space. We've seen the Sioux Line building, we've seen a number of buildings downtown either become hotels or become condo buildings. The last thing we need is more office space development. What we really do need is to be an oasis for people who are getting older, people who have health problems, people who want to use those facilities and those hospitals. And yes, we'll use the theaters, and we'll use the Whole Foods, and we'll shop, and we'll live our lives here. And we might not even have to drive, but then that would be also an advantage to draw some of that elderly population to our city. I think the parks that we do build have to be endemic of that elderly population that is coming in, those people to whom we wish to have as our neighbors, who probably aren't going to be much of troublemakers or cause us too much problems.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Hofstad.
Well, I'm really excited to talk about this because it's been something I've been thinking about for a very long time. In fact, when we talked about building the new central library over a decade ago, one of the issues is how did we connect that library with the important assets throughout the city. And we actually wanted to put a park on the old hotel site, something that's seriously being considered today. So that, along with my work on the City Council over the last 8 years, working with the downtown community on the 2025 plan, one of the major concerns that we've had is how do we connect this great riverfront? How do we extend that riverfront into North Minneapolis? How do we create and connect it to Cedar Riverside? We also talked about this at the Stadium Commission, of which I was a member of, and I made the proposal and the motion that passed that took that stadium footprint and expanded it to our riverfront, extended it over to Cedar Riverside. This is not, our core is really a broader core than what we're accustomed to thinking about. That's the reason why I support having various transit options, biking, walking, and also a variety of other kinds of means. That's why I worked actively with the theater district, so we can look at how we connect that district with the theater district over on 13th Avenue. How do we connect it over to the arts district and the Walker? How do we connect it to the Institute? These are all connectivities, all connections that are really critical to who we are as a city. This is the potential that all of us have when we think about the growth. This is really the future and part of my vision that I have for the city of Minneapolis.
Thank you. Okay, Jacob Fry, we'll start with you for this next question. What are your thoughts on the streetcar plan that was recently approved by the City Council.
To be very clear, I'm for it. I think it's a phenomenal idea. And I'll tell you exactly why. You know, they'll say that the streetcars are great because, one, they're low to the ground, in fact, they're even with the ground, so a disabled individual can easily get on and get off. Two, it's a wider aisle. And three, it is a smoother ride. All those things are great. But that's actually not the reason that I'm for them. The reason I'm for them is the cool factor and the investment that it will trigger. Don't you want to be able to say to your friend who's visiting from New York, fly into MSP, take the light rail down to the Nicollet Avenue stop, hop on a streetcar, and I'll meet you for dinner about 30 minutes later. That's the kind of stuff that makes a city dynamic. That's the kind of stuff that makes a city thrive. Not to mention, if you look at the other cities that have invested in streetcars, and it'll cost, by the way, about between $160 and $200 million, but they've seen over $1 billion worth of investment along those corridors. Over $1 billion. Think what that would do to the areas that are struggling right now. Think if we had, and by the way, the present streetcar line, it's looking at going somewhere in South Minneapolis on Nicollet Avenue, down Nicollet, it'll get to First Street on the river, make a left-hand turn, make a right on Hennepin, across the Hennepin Avenue Bridge, left on Central and out some undetermined distance. Think what that would do to the areas out further on Central. Not to mention, if we put a streetcar on Washington and 3rd Street downtown, think what that would do to North Minneapolis. We need to be thinking about the city as a whole, and streetcars would benefit the city as a whole.
Thank you. Michael Catch?
Wow. Let's talk about a wow factor. Because this is right from the feasibility study for the streetcars that was delivered to the city of Minneapolis. A per-hour operation of a streetcar costs roughly $130. To operate a bus the same period of time is $85. Let's talk about that wow factor when you're going to use TIF financing and take $200 million worth of real estate and take it off the tax rolls so far as inflation is concerned for the future growth of the city of Minneapolis. For what, 20 years? That over the next 20 years that we're not going to experience any inflation. Interest rates are never going to go up in the next 20 years, and our unions and the people who work for us are never going to demand over the next 20 years another pay increase. Because if they do, the wow factor is going to be, well, gosh, we got really pretty streetcars and look, they were nice enough to print our tax bill by Coach because we have a designer tax bill. So that's a real wow factor. The truth of the matter is it's another thing that we just plain cannot and should not afford. It's not where our money should be invested. We have to be concerned about not going down the road of every other urban destination, Detroit, Indianapolis, St. Louis, where you have dying urban cores because, well, the city council wow, let's have an arch. Let's build a new stadium. Let's have wow. And in the end, well, our seniors can't afford to live here because, wow, the taxes are too high. Wow, we can't afford police officers. Wow, the garbage can't get picked up because nobody wants to work for what we can afford to pay. Or wow, we tripled or quadrupled your property taxes, as we have over the last 7 years. Let's start thinking as how do we keep our most vulnerable members, our seniors, our disabled, families with children, how do we keep them in our community without worrying about, oh gosh, I'm going to be so good, I'm going to impress my friend from Manhattan, I'm going to impress my friend from Chicago, I've got a streetcar. I'm more impressed by you. I love living in a neighborhood with you.
Time's up. Thank you. Councilmember Hosted.
Wow! Is this controversial or what? It is. This is exactly the conversation that we've been having at the city council and throughout the community. You think these are easy decisions when you go sit on the council? It's not. You think that what you read in the newspaper is actually happening at the council meetings? No, it's not. These are the kinds of discussions that are going on. Right, Councilmember Goodman? She's still here? Yeah, she knows. Absolutely. These are controversial decisions that demand all of us to weigh in and say whether or not we want to have a streetcar in our city. I voted for it. And you know why I voted for it? Because based on analysis and based on research throughout the world, not just in the city of Minneapolis, it demonstrates that it delivers economic development. Now, some people would say, why did we tear them up to begin with? anybody here remember when there were streetcars in the city of Minneapolis? Why don't see? Why do we do that? Well, there are lots of reasons. We don't have time to go into it now, but I will tell you, it creates economic development. And in the city of Minneapolis, if you want to keep your taxes down, as they are going this year, we have to look at a variety of options in which we can deliver a wow factor. That's one of the reasons why we have a stadium. That's one of the reasons why we have a 2025 plan. That's one of the reasons why we're having the discussion we're having today. Because the city of Minneapolis cannot stand still. We are competing with cities like Cincinnati. We are competing with the rest of the world. And in order to do that, we have to have that wow factor.
Thank you. Christina?
Well, I think I might keep my answer a little short, so maybe we can move on to some other topics. However, I will speak to streetcars. I like streetcars. I would have supported streetcars if I were on the city council, or would, with some, reservations, with some caveats, and with looking at the cost and comparing the cost to bus transportation. I do see the economics that Michael is pointing out, and I think that's a concern. I'd really like to see streetcars viewed separately from transportation. I'd like to see streetcars viewed as economic development and look at transportation somewhat separately, because I think they're very different things. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Michael, we'll start with you next for this question. How would you work to improve public safety in the ward and address downtown's crime perception problem?
Well, we got one of the safest wards in the city. We don't live in North Minneapolis, obviously, some of us live in North Minneapolis, but it's not like North Minneapolis over on Lindale and Broadway. But to be perfectly straight with you is I think that public safety begins with us, that we have to work to not become victims. And I think that it would be incumbent of our law enforcement and our police to give us training courses on how not to be a victim, a lot of self-defense courses. Hell, we've got a great gun range. Perhaps, maybe even the police should do a concealed carry course. But we really need to engage in how we are not a victim. The police can't help you until somebody hurts you. I would prefer you never be hurt. I prefer you to be the toughest possible victim in the city. They'll go somewhere else to commit crime because you're just not an easy target. And I think the best way we can do that is, again, we partner with our police. We have block captains and precinct captains, and we get out there and we watch our neighborhoods. And again, we protect ourselves.
Thank you. Councilmember Hofstad.
I have represented some of the toughest areas in the city of Minneapolis and North Minneapolis. So if anybody has any issues with crime, I probably dealt with it. I've closed down businesses because they were so unsafe that people were not stopping at a stoplight. They would prefer to get a ticket or hit by someone rather than stop because they were dealing drugs. I know what it's like to say to a business owner that either you're with us or against us. I know what it's like to put businesses out of business. I've done it. I've been there. I know how hard it is to go to a funeral of a 2-year-old. What do you say to a family when their child has been shot? Those are the kinds of issues I've dealt with. That's the area that I've represented. It's a difficult job that I have done, and I know how to do it. And you may look at me and say, look how small she is. I've heard that before. And you know what? It doesn't frighten me. I know what we need to have a safe city. And every one of you are important to me. And there isn't a day that I don't think or work about public safety. Not only yours, but the officers that represent us. and make the difficult decisions every single day.
Thank you. Christina?
I think in addressing public safety, we're specifically talking about downtown, is one of the best things we can do is have mixed-use development downtown and have a viable downtown with lots of housing, with families, have a downtown area that actually draws people, that draws teenagers, that is a downtown with, like Jacob says, lots of eyes on the streets. I think that makes a huge difference. And I do see downtown moving somewhat in that direction with the North Loop and with this area. And I think you can attest to the fact that when people live downtown, downtown is safer. That being said, I do have to say that one of the issues in my campaign that I've been addressing is police accountability and police misconduct. And I do think we need to look at when we're talking about public safety and victims, I think we also have to recognize that there are people in our city that feel themselves victimized, and that's a real issue. And the city has paid out some $14 million over the last decade in lawsuits, and we have many misconduct cases, over almost 500, without any resolution or none of them being brought forward. And so public safety also, we need to look at our youth. Do our youth feel safe downtown? Are our youth welcome? Are our youth of color welcome? We don't need any more Trayvon Martins. We don't need any more Terrence Franklins. And that is also a public safety component that I can see. So thank you.
Thank you. Jacob?
Safety is an extremely important issue, and our city will never entirely thrive until every one of the citizens from every one of the backgrounds feel safe. As I mentioned earlier, I am a proponent of diversity. And it's not just diversity in terms of people, it's also diversity in terms of use. Let's look at the downtown right now. Think about where the Wells Fargo building and the IDS Center is. Very wealthy people going in and out all day long, but just from 9 to 5. Consider how that area is in the beforehand and in the aftermath. Because it's just one use, because it's just commercial, and because you've got everybody going into work at 9 a.m. and everybody leaving at 5:30 p.m., it's dangerous. We need to be looking at mixed use. That is the future of every city and should be the future of Minneapolis. It is exceedingly important. Second off, we need to be working with the police officers directly. And third, and this is oftentimes not talked about, we need gun control reform. And oftentimes we'll say, well, that's not necessarily an issue for the city. Well, I'll say it is. It is. There's no reason that we should have people be able to walk around and unload 30 rounds before they have to reload. That's ridiculous. And in fact, I've been the chair of Protect Minnesota, the Protect Minnesota Political Action Committee for the last few years, and we've been working adamantly, and I've been going over to the legislature to be an advocate for people in our cities to make sure that exactly what Councilmember Hofstad was so aptly pointing out doesn't happen. I've been working on the grassroots level every single day, and in fact, the city of Minneapolis gave me the first annual Martin Luther King Jr. Award for that very work, which I'm exceedingly proud of. That's the kind of work I want to continue at City Hall.
Okay, thank you. All right, now we're going to move on to questions from the audience. We've got lots of good ones. Councilmember Hofstad, we will start with you for this one. Where will you take our 3rd Ward in 4 years? What is your vision?
Wow, I think we're talking about the wow factor. Well, the riverfront. I haven't talked very much about that, but that's really a passion of mine. Starting as a child when I walked over the Laurie Avenue Bridge when it was roaring beneath me. It's always been my passion, and I see that as one of the directions that we need to go to as a city. With the stadium, it creates opportunities to fill those vacant parking lots with robust businesses, expanded businesses for women and minorities, and increase our transit options, whether they be streetcars or a variety of other options and more pedestrian elements to our city. In addition to that, partnerships. We have, through the 2025 plan, a variety of other plans that we have underway at the city in our new arts plan and vitality indexes, demonstrated that we are committed more strongly to work with our partners, the arts community and a variety of others. The Viking Stadium, I think one of the advantages of that is it brought out the business community to start interfacing more directly with city business, and I think that's also healthy. And it has engaged a wide variety of residents that you see today. Continuing our neighborhood groups and expanding those and making them stronger so that you have a voice in everything that we do in the city of Minneapolis. And of course, continuing the safety efforts that we've had. We need to have a safe city in order to have an economically strong base. We need to have that, as well as relationships with the state and federal government. We have some work to do there, I think.
Thank you. Christina?
There's a lot of wonderful things that have been happening in the 3rd Ward and in the city that I would like to see continue, and that is the riverfront development. It is the arts scene that is wonderful in Northeast Minneapolis, where I live, but also is enhanced and is also very vibrant in this area as well. There's a lot of positive things happening that the City Council has done that I would like to follow through on with my colleague Cam Gordon, who serves on the City Council right now as a Green. So I would look at these issues from that perspective of looking at things through a lens of the environment, for one thing. Also, however, with the 3rd Ward, I would like to see more inclusivity in the 3rd Ward. I still think that there are people, I know that there are people in the 3rd Ward that do not feel included in the political process, that are very discouraged, angry even. And I would like to see the 3rd Ward in 4 years include those people. And so in closing, what I would say is that it would be up to the constituents where the ward would want to go in 4 years, and that's what I would look to as input. I haven't been on City Council, that's the truth, so I would really look to all of you and everyone else to give me that input on where you want the 3rd Ward to be in 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Jacob?
Well, I'm really excited about the potential for this 3rd Ward in the next 4 years. Think about what we've got. We've got a stadium going in. We've got one of the fastest, most organically growing neighborhoods in the entire country in North Loop. We've got a downtown with a ton of revenue coming in. We've got the Arts District in Northeast. We've got about half the university. This is an area that is jam-packed with potential, and we need a City Council member that's going to make sure every bit of that potential is realized. I believe that a city realizes its full potential by connecting people to people. We can be connecting young professionals in North Loop to artists in Northeast. We can be connecting students at the university to empty nesters downtown. Whether you've lived here for 50 years or 50 days, whether you've grown up in Northeast Minneapolis, Northern Virginia, or East Africa, you deserve to be part at the process, you deserve to be at the table, because that's when innovation gets triggered. That's when entrepreneur gets started, and that's when our city is really going to rock. That's vague. That's kind of vague and overarching. I understand that. Now let's get kind of specific. Right now, in downtown, we have a whole lot of surface parking lots, and I believe they are very much the bane of downtown. And surface lot parking owners can stay in existence by paying somebody $8 an hour to take tickets, and they have basically no overhead. We need to incentivize them to sell. Right now in the city, we have an ordinance that says that you can't knock down a building and put a surface lot in its place, and that's a good start. In Chicago, though, they've taken this about 6 steps further. They've said to these parking lot owners, all right, here's what you need to do. You need to put wrought iron fencing around the outside, which is quite expensive. You need to have a certain percentage of the parking lot allocated to green space, trees, flowers, etc. In the end, one of 2 things ended up happening. Either 1, they were forced to sell because complying with those mandates was prohibitively expensive. Or two, they complied with those mandates, and what you ended up with is a kind of beautiful parking lot. And they're actually called parking
Time's
orchards.
up. Thank you. All right, Michael.
Thank you. First off, before I get this, I want to make sure that I'm clear. I am a supporter of the U.S. Constitution and the Second Amendment, and I will never, ever support gun control. So if that's a deal killer for you, then that's a deal killer for you. But what it comes down to within our future in the city of Minneapolis is that we are going to see in the next several months the end of tapering. We have to look at macroeconomics, and right now the Federal Reserve is dumping $83 billion into the economy a month. Eventually that's going to come to an end. We're going to see rising interest rates. The reason why we have so many surface parking lots is because we used to have projects there. They used to get cheap credit. They were going to build all kinds of things. And then 2008 came, and the real estate crashed. And now we have these lots that are seeking development. But the reality is that we don't want to create a bigger real estate bubble in Minneapolis. We don't want to overbuild the city. We want organic development. What I really want to see in 4 years is everybody still here. In 4 years, I want to look out and see the same faces. I want to know that none of my neighbors had to move away because, gosh, we had to raise property taxes because we borrowed so much money and it's costing us so much just to pay off the debt that people just couldn't afford to live here, couldn't afford to keep their homes, couldn't afford to stay in our city. I want to see some sort of freeze on people with fixed incomes for their property taxes. I think we have to stop increasing people's property taxes who can least afford to pay those increases. When we see, Diane can say we did all these great things over the last 10 years, but the truth of the matter is it came at a price. Our property taxes have not doubled, they haven't tripled, they've quadrupled over the last 10 years. And I just don't want to see new faces. I don't want to see an empty room. I don't want to see tons of real estate on the market like we did back in the 1980s when we had Loring Park was empty.
Time's up. All right, next question, we'll start with Christina. What will you do to promote small businesses in the new Third Ward?
Okay, well, that's a great question for me. That's something that I've worked really hard at with my job, my many jobs. Been a small business owner and worked at Eastside Food Co-op. Also, we have been an anchor business and have created a number of networks with other businesses, a number of promotions and marketing. I know everyone talks about the regulation in Minneapolis being problematic. So definitely I think that that's true, and I think that's a huge area of concern and something to look at. Streamlining, licensing, making it easy to open a business, yes, number one priority. One of the organizations that I recently became a founding member of is the Northeast Investment Co-op. And this is a new economic model to address distressed areas. And the great thing about it is it doesn't involve government funding. It is private citizens getting together, collectively putting their money together and deciding to address distressed properties. And we recently bought a property on Central Avenue, and we're renovating it, and we're going to be responsible landlords. So I think we can look at different models of economic development. We can look at collectives, we can look at cooperatives, we can look at marketing and promotion. Again, I have a strong marketing and promotions background. So I'd love to work on that issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Next to Jacob.
First, I'd actually like to commend Christina on her efforts specifically for small and local businesses. She's done a phenomenal job. Small and local businesses are very much the heart and soul of our community. You don't say you live at 316 East Hennepin. I say you live across the street from Surdyk's, or you live down the block from Maves. But now think that the difficulty in for a small and local business to open these days is extraordinary. So we definitely need regulatory reform. Think about a restaurant trying to open. Let's say you need a bigger sign. Maybe you want a patio. Maybe you want to play some music inside. You need a liquor license. You want to have some dancing. All these things require permits. Until about 8 months later, 9 months later, you're still in the permitting process, and next thing you know, the capital that you initially had invested in your project is gone. and the small local business is forced to go elsewhere or ultimately shut down. This is a big problem, and we do need continued regulatory reform. The second piece is that we need to lessen the square footage of these units. When big conglomerate franchises come in, they want to set up their boilerplate, and their boilerplate may require 2,800 to 3,000 square foot to put the place in. It also costs quite a bit. The only people that are able to afford, I shouldn't say people, the only things that are able to afford it are corporations and major franchises. Now, small local businesses, if they've got a narrower space to work with, they're better able to pay rent, and it would prohibit a lot of the conglomerates from coming in and disengaging them.
Thank you. Michael?
I think regulatory reform is incredibly important. I think that we have put out government as a product. We've decided that we need an ordinance to cover everything, a permit for everything. And as a result, we have lost the charm of small businesses that we used to have in our neighborhoods. I think we need to find ways of preserving that sort of lifestyle, a lifestyle I grew up in. My family was in men's retail for 5 generations. I would have been generation number 6, but first Carol's put us out of business, and then Men's Warehouse put them out of business. But I grew up in a small business, entrepreneurial family. And I can tell you right now, the reason why we have no economic recovery is nobody's opening businesses. And unless you have those small businesses, unless those people are hiring other people, and unless those businesses are organic from our neighborhoods, we're not going to see the kind of job growth that we're going to need. If you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers, easy for me to say, but if you look at those numbers, we don't count a lot of people who are looking for work. We need to actually get out there and say, okay, on a progressive scale, some people probably shouldn't be paying a permit fee. Maybe we should be looking at maybe fewer of these big box, big corporate stores and start maybe making it easier and level the playing field for the guy down the block or upstairs in the condo upstairs to open their own. And as a city, we really need to make the distinction between big multinational corporations and, well, the rest of us. And we have to do more to promote the rest of us and not them.
Thank you. Councilmember Hofstad.
Thank you. Over the last 2 years, we have reorganized regulatory services for the very reasons that we've been talking about these last few minutes. Because it has been difficult for small businesses, in fact any business, to locate or relocate in the city of Minneapolis. So I've actively been a part of that and voted on those new regulations to reduce regulations and to make it easier, more customer service oriented. We have hired the new head of regulatory services, a person who's not only an attorney, but a person who understands what business is, and that customer service is vital to growing small businesses within the area. I supported the Dinky Town moratorium and opposed a very large development because it was going to affect small businesses and force them out of the Dinky Town neighborhood. I've actually acted and voted on the question and delivered. If you look through Northeast, if you look at North Minneapolis and the areas that I represent in North Minneapolis, you'll see there are more businesses. I have sponsored small businesses. I have a neighborhood fest, which is tomorrow evening and starting at 5:30 at Nicollet Island Pavilion, that promotes business within our community. I've actively not only said it, I've actively done it.
Okay, how's everyone doing? Stamina for another question? Yeah. You're all right? Maybe 2? Yeah. Okay, we'll see. Well, I'll keep checking. You have a meeting after? You do? Okay. All right, we'll do one more and then we'll do closing statements. Thank you for everyone for being so attentive. Okay, Jacob, we will start with you for this question. Under ranked choice voting, who is your second choice for Ward 3 Council? I know, kind of a tricky mean one. And you could say third choice too, right? You get 3 choices.
Well, I can tell you who my first choice is. You know, Honestly, I do not know at this point. Ranked choice voting is a somewhat new concept that we're going to be entering into. I think it'll be relatively straightforward for the purpose of this city council race. I think it's going to be a little bit more difficult when you have 30-some mayoral candidates. What's great about it, though, is it allows, I think, third parties to get involved, 30 parties to ultimately have a say, and I certainly welcome the additional inclusion. There's no way I'm going to answer that question.
Fair enough, fair enough. Okay, Michael.
I'm not going to completely cap out, but I won't give the rank and order. I'm going to tell you that I'm disciplined within our police force and the fact that we are paying out far too much in losses in the city of Minneapolis. And you know that the League of Cities writes insurance policies for cities, but they won't write one for Minneapolis because there's no risk control. And risk control is going to be important. And on that I agree with Christina, and I really would hope that one of us would be able to get in and put in some risk control so that we would not self-insure anymore, but be able to obtain insurance and not make these huge payouts on all these lawsuits that come to the city. On the Dinkytown moratorium, I would have voted 4 square with Diane. She was absolutely right. The culture of Dinkytown and the culture of our cities need to be maintained, and I was completely with her on that. But I won't give you a ranking. At this point, I don't really know how I'm going to rank them. But how many times have we argued, Diane? Honestly, over the years? I mean, let's see, Central Library, I said no, you said yes. The library merger with Hennepin County, you said yes, I said no. The NRP, I said yes, you said no. On the Viking Stadium, you said yes, I said no. I mean, and then on streetcars, you're on completely on the other side. So, I mean, what it comes down to is, I have to look at least the people who agree with me most about the nature of the city, which the reason why I love the city is not because I have this vision it's going to be something great in the future, because it's great right now. How do we keep it great right now? How do we stay great? Not how do we build something that we don't know where we're going to be living. We love it now. We live here because we love it now, and we need to preserve what we love.
Thank you, Councilmember Hofstad.
Well, I think we're all consistent on this. We aren't going to give any answer. So at least that's one thing we agree on. I agree on the first person that I'd like to have as the first choice. I hope you all do as well. Regarding the other 2 choices, we have 2 members of the panel that have lived in the city. I've seen them interact. We have had arguments and disagreements, and they have been actively involved in our community because they've lived here. They've been part of our DNA. And so that's my answer.
Okay, Christina.
Well, I think I'll maybe use this opportunity to just briefly talk about some of the differences that I do have and some of the things that fueled my running for city council. One was the stadium and the fact that the charter was not honored, and that citizens, whether you like the Viking Stadium or not, it should have been put to a vote. And I worked with an organization called Progressive Minnesota a long time ago to put that on the charter. And any spending, any public subsidy over 10 million should have been put to a vote. And that's extremely distressing to me. The disbanding of the Civilian Review Authority, also very distressing. It has created a city that not only are we talking about the money, we're talking about lives. We're talking about people that have been killed, tasered. We're talking about families. We're talking about funerals. So that is another thing I really want to see, an authority that oversees the police. We can't have the police investigating themselves. We need to have them have individual liability insurance, and we need to have an agency with teeth. The other issue was NRP. I stood really strong against the gutting of NRP. In terms of a second choice, I will be honest and say I'd be hard-pressed to vote for a major party, because I am very much a third-party person. I believe that the alternatives, the options that we need in this city, state, country have to do with third parties and new voices and alternatives, and that can be the Greens, the Independents, the Libertarians, the Socialists. I think that makes our country stronger to have all those different voices, and that we need to have more than a one-party city. I don't think that's full representation. Thank you.
Okay, on to closing statements.
One more question.
What was that? You want more questions? They've got a meeting though. They've got a big agenda. We can't keep them here until midnight. Andrew will be very mad at all of you. Okay, closing statements. We will start with Michael.
I think I've pretty much communicated who I am. I've been active in this community a long time. I'm not always a popular person, but a lot of times being popular is not the right side of the argument. I could have been popular at the legislature last year when I spent, well, the year before that, when I spent all that time working to try to support the city charter. I was the person who brought the city charter to Dave Thompson, who was the deputy Senate Majority Leader, and said what you're voting on is spit in the face of the people of Minneapolis. Unfortunately, it was our team who was spitting, so it was a tough sell. But the only reason why we had traction, and yes, I was able to kill the stadium 3 times, it just kept coming back to life. It was like a zombie. It just popped out of the grave and was, oh, we're going to have a stadium. I actually told Bud Selig that I'd help the Vikings move. I only live 4 blocks away. I'll come and pack the truck if they really want to go. But they fill that stadium every week, so I don't really understand why they're leaving. But hey, if they want to go, they're free to do that. At least if the games won't be blocked out, I'll be able to see them on TV. But that's the reality. The reality is I was the person who got NRP, at least in some form, to try to protect the neighborhood associations through 3 Republican-controlled committees in the state Senate. That was my doing. I went and I put together coalitions of Democrats and Republicans at the state legislature to help the city. I also basically went to Tony Cornish, who at the time was the director of public safety at the Minnesota State House, and said that we need more money for fire trucks. Right now, our fire department has fire trucks that have an average age of 1989. How many people are driving vehicles from 1989 now? I mean, and how reliable are those? Because that's what we're depending on, the fire department. But the truth of the matter is, there are federal funds from the Department of Homeland Security.
Time's up. Thank you.
Thank you. I get to finish my sentence? Well, I said that there are federal funds that we
time's up. You gotta sit down. Thank you. Sorry, I'll talk.
Can't I just be like President Obama and just keep going?
We'll just finish it in our minds. Thank you, Michael. Councilmember Hofstad.
Well, thank you everyone for coming tonight. I know how busy everyone is with grocery shopping and all the things that we try to do to hold things together. I would appreciate your support as your council person for the 3rd Ward. I've been in the trenches and I think I know what it takes to make a successful ward and a successful city. I am eager to represent you and be part of the city council again for another 4 years. These are not easy decisions that the council makes, as you just talked about today. And with each decision come people who really like you and who really don't like you. In the whole process, you have people who then have really vibrant discussions with you. That's the job of the council person that I have done every year for the last 8 years. You need an independent voice. I have been that independent voice. You need someone who can make quick and strong decisions. I've been that person. I've been the person that has listened not only to the community by going to community meetings, by responding to emails, but holding meetings in the community for you and with you. I have been your partner as we've created a city that has become stronger in the last 8 years economically, and a city that welcomes each and every one of us to the table. If you look around the room, we have to include every single person who comes to our table. That's been my background. Growing in Northeast Minneapolis, we always invited. There was always room at the table. That's how I see the city of Minneapolis being. Not only for all of the people who want to be here, how do we make things better for our citizens, for our businesses. Thank you. I'd appreciate your vote Tuesday, November 5th, or earlier, because you can vote earlier too.
Thank you, Councilmember Hofstad. Christina?
Jacob, I just want to say in terms of your issues, surface lots, improved constituent service, I'm right there with you. Diane, you've been a really strong advocate for the river and for the environment, and I appreciate that. Michael, I really appreciate your independence and your willingness to speak your mind on a lot of the same issues that I care about, that I'm outspoken about. What I can offer are those issues, those attributes, and a lot more, because I embrace those ideas, and yet what I can bring to the City Council, what I hope to bring to the City Council with your help, is also an alternative for people who need to be included in the process. And we talk a lot about the gaps in our city, and the economic gaps, and the disparities. That's really true. It might not seem so apparent in this part of town, but you're all part of Minneapolis, so you see that. And that's something that's incredibly crucial to me. That's a promise I made, to make racial justice at the top of my campaign and to look at these issues of economic disparity. Our city can't thrive unless we all thrive together. And that is an area I would work on, and I would really appreciate your going to my website, learning more about my issues, and I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to me tonight.
And finally, Jacob.
I don't know if you heard it, but in the previous answer, Councilmember Hofstede pointed to say that there were two people behind her that grew up here and that had been invested in the fabric of the community. I did not grow up here. I actually grew up in Northern Virginia, and that has been a critique of me throughout this entire campaign. I believe, though, that everybody should be at the process. It isn't just lip service when it works or it's convenient. I believe that everybody should be in part of the process, whether you grew up in Northern Virginia or East Africa. You do deserve to be at the table, and it's not just some campaign stump speech. That's the truth. And I've been incredibly invested in this community. And I've been a community organizer the entire time. I organized the big gay race, mobilizing about 10,000 people and raising over $500,000 for marriage equality. I helped out with North Minneapolis as a legal advocate following the hurricane. I helped found an organization called Isarun, which is around the empowerment of Somali women. I have been involved on a day-to-day basis. The city of Minneapolis gave me the first annual Martin Luther King Jr. Award for that very work, and I will continue to do that at City Hall. We need somebody in office that's effective, that's able to work well with others, that's able to retain staff. We need somebody that is able to create an organization, and we've done that in spades. We've done that in spades to win the DFL endorsement, almost 80% to 20%. And here's the final thing. When I say that I'm going to do something, I do it. I kept my word in honoring the DFL endorsement, and I will keep my word on every single one of the promises that I'm going to do today. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, candidates, so much for a great, vigorous conversation. And thanks to all of you for being such a wonderful and attentive audience. I'm going to put in a plug, too, for our voter's guide that the Journal is putting out October 17th. Big task this year to put that together, so I hope you all check it out. Thank you all so very much.